the NFC East non-negotiables. The biggest key, the non-negotiables for teams to be part of the playoff picture, part of the division race in 2024. Start out with the team that's got the hardest path, I think it's fair to say, the New York Giants. The non-negotiable to me is that Daniel Jones plays like a $40 million quarterback, which, by the way, doesn't sound like that crazy of a number based on all the contracts that have gotten done since.
Not anymore.
But when you give him that contract, which obviously there was a lot involved, we saw some of it play out on Hard Knocks last week. I mean, when he says, hey, we offered Saquon a whole bunch of money last year and he didn't take it, they tried to get that deal done with Saquon. Right. It didn't happen. They pivoted. They had to tag him. They gave Daniel Jones the contract because all of a sudden your quarterback had the leverage. It didn't work out in 2023. He's had too many injuries. That's the bottom line. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to play up to that level. They've given him a lot of tools. The whole excuses of, well, we haven't had the weapons around to tell what he is. Now you have. You lost Saquon. This is going to be a lot, though, on Daniel Jones' shoulders. He's going to have to figure out how to move that team forward. For the Philadelphia Eagles, to me, the non-negotiable would be they get back to playing offense the way that they have when they were one of the best teams in the NFL. From the middle of the 2021 season, Nick Sirianni's first year, through like last November, statistically, I believe they had the best record in the NFL. Somebody can cross-check me on that. It was one of the best records. They're one of the best teams. They obviously had the Super Bowl run. But for like 2 years there, they're one of the best teams in football, and a lot of things got away from them down the stretch last season. You're now changing out both your coordinators again. It has to come back to how do we put Jalen Hurts in the best position to succeed? How do we play that style of football? Kellen Moore's reputation is, I want to chuck the ball all over the place. I think that in this case, they're going to be more balanced. They paid Saquon a lot of money to be a part of that balance. They're going to get him out in space. It's got to be play offense the way that you have when you were one of the best teams in the league, because down the stretch last year, that did not look like the same Eagles team. For the Commanders, they are, I said this yesterday on the Insiders on NFL Network, if you stacked up all the teams that I don't know what they're going to be, the Commanders are one of the top teams on the list. I know Dan Quinn is a hell of a culture builder. I know Jaden Daniels was a hell of a college quarterback. Beyond that, you've got this combination of, the Austin Ecklers, the Bobby Wagners, the big names that are more toward the back end of their career. You've obviously got some of the holdovers like Terry McLaurin. I just don't know. Maybe they get that first-year boost like we see all the time from head coaches come in and take a team, and it's a different vibe. You're frowning over there, Brockman. It's a lot to ask, right?
I just think they're going to be back in the top 5 of the draft again. It just seems almost inevitable.
To me, the non-negotiable of this entire thing is keep the pressure off this season. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be looking at this, and it's going to be the instantaneous. We got to go out and win. We got Jaden Daniels. We can right now. We can be that team. That could be this year's C.J. Stroud. We can be the Texans from a year ago. New coach, positive energy, new quarterback. Keep those expectations off. They're building this thing. Yes, they went out and signed a bunch of veterans, but part of that is you bring in Austin Eckler and Bobby Wagner to be culture builders, not because you think you're getting Bobby Wagner from 8 years ago. He's still a really good player.
Exactly, but he's may not be an all-pro. Slower. Yeah. I mean, their win total is 6.5. I'd be shocked if that went over.
But I'm not going to give over-under advice, but I would say I think that the expectations of Commanders fans are much higher than that. I think that there's a belief. You got to take this into account. And I'm talking to ownership, too. All right, Josh Harris, Bob Myers, to the extent that he's still involved with the organization. We see all the time NBA teams make midseason changes and make postseason changes, and coaches come and go. The NFL is different here. Having a level of patience, which I have no reason to believe Josh Harris won't, but not looking at this like an NBA season where you get to the trade deadline and you're going to make some massive trade and get 7 first-round picks. It's not even possible in the NFL, but it's also a matter of you got to take this into account that this is a process to get this thing headed in the right direction. So patience with Dan Quinn, patience with Jaden Daniels, patience with the entire operation, I think is going to be critical. And then with the Cowboys, I mean, there's a lot that still has to be sorted out here. Even over the next 8 days before they go to training camp, is CeeDee Lamb going to be there? Is Dak Prescott going to get a deal? Do they even potentially do a Mike McCarthy extension prior to the start of the season? How does that whole thing play out? There's not a lot of occasions, I can't think of one, where you had the head coach and the quarterback both going into the last year of their deals, much less on a team that's won 12 games each of the last 3 seasons. This is rare air that TJ, your Cowboys, are in right now. To me, the non-negotiable for Dallas is that Dak has to play his absolute best. Yeah. We can talk about we can talk about the defense changes. Dan Quinn's not there anymore. Different culture, different energy with Mike Zimmer. Mike Zimmer's a really good coach. They're going to have buy-in on that side too. There's no doubt about it. But this, TJ, in my opinion, has to be we see the best of Dak, the best version, and he's played really well the past couple of years here.
Second in MVP last year.
We see the best Dak Prescott elevating everybody, including into January.
Super necessary, man. But like I said, how much better can he get regular season? I know the comeback's going to be the playoffs, but regular season-wise, he played almost as well as you can expect.
You can easily argue that last year with Mike McCarthy calling the plays, remember, for the first time, truly running his offense, was the best that we've seen with Dak. For whatever reason, everything flopped in the playoffs. The warning signs in that game were when it's the first or second series and CD comes off the field and he's chucking his helmet, and Mike McCarthy's going over and talking to him, and it's like there's just something that's a little bit off. And the Packers, to their credit, had a fantastic approach in terms of how they were going to attack him.
Tom, there were receivers who I'd never heard of wide open down the field catching balls with no DBs.
You don't have Dontavian Wicks in fantasy like Brockman, who's decided whether to keep him in the last round?
You know,
that's great value.
It is tremendous value, but that versus A.J. Brown in the second is your question. Green Bay's got a lot of receivers.
They got a ton of receivers.
Dontavian Wicks is a really fun story, though.
I mean, I was watching a clip today with, Mina Kimes and Kevin Clark talking about Dontavian Wicks could be the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay by the end of the season. That's really exciting.
Better than Jaden Reed, better than Christian Watson. I mean, you hope Christian Watson could figure out the hamstring stuff. Yeah. But Jaden Reed's a pretty darn good player, too.
I agree. But Wicks could have that Reed breakout this year, that Jaden Reed had last year, I think.
Which a funny thing, too, somebody mentioned about Keon Coleman, because remember, he was at Michigan State with Jaden Reed. And Keon Coleman was playing basketball there and was still the first option a lot ahead of Jaden Reed. When we talk about, why do the Bills like Keon Coleman enough that they made the trade to go back and then took him at the top at 2, it's a big reason of it. Another guy who you're figuring, this guy's got unbelievable athletic upside. He hasn't even trained to be
a wide receiver.
To play football in general. He hasn't trained that way. He's trained to play basketball a year and a half ago.
Plus, he's go
back to the AFC
incredibly
East
entertaining, which is also a little... Doesn't help you on the field, but it'll help endear him to all the sponsors.
Yeah, it'll help. It'll help him get the what's the Tim Hortons deal? It'll help him.
Who the hell is Tim Horton?
Yeah, he doesn't. I don't think Keon needs any coffee, but it'll help him. Help him for that.
Well, he needs a Macy's deal after the whole thing with the coat. That's who should be hooking him up.
That was one of the best. Now again, it's all fun and games until you actually go out there and play.
Yeah,
that's why this is the best time of year. I'm sitting there yesterday in a meeting playing out my training camp travels. It's like you're going to go everywhere. Everybody's going to have something to be positive about. Even if it's a, hey, take it easy, pump the brakes. We're the Commanders or whoever. Just give us, let us breathe. The Patriots, let us breathe a little bit here. But you still have a reason for everybody to be optimistic.
And that's what's fun, right? Because, the ball hasn't been kicked off yet. So we have all these remaining weeks to sit and speculate and, and visualize your team hoisting up the Lombardi Trophy.
Right. I think that people within the league, by and large, know more or less what they have, right? You might have some. I remember going through the Texans last year. And they're definitely, when I was bringing up, man, this looks pretty good. Because I was there on a day that Tank Dell was absolutely lighting it up, him and C.J. Stroud. This was first week of camp. And so I was like, man, Tank Dell is open on every play. You guys might have a chance here to kind of compete. And everyone was like, oh, man, I was like, if you win 8-9 games after what Houston's been through, you're a hero. It's like, oh, man, we got to just take it easy on us. Well, sure enough, they went out. They played really well. That's not saying I'm like a savant watching one practice. It's just to say, I think by and large, you kind of know what your baseline is. Mm-hmm. You're hoping that you hit the upside. Right. There are definitely teams going into this year who, because you have to tell your owners stuff like this, hey, we're not going to be good this year. It's not tanking. There's an organizational ebb and flow when you're in a salary cap league. Yeah. You go through periods of spending and you go through periods of cutting. Unless you're the Saints and you're just all gas all the time thinking, well, the cap's going to keep going up, and then you have a global pandemic and it dips in a year and you're still trying to adjust to that. But you have a plan. You have to be on that. You're hoping you can compete every year in and year out, but that's the hardest thing to do in the NFL. So there's teams that know. There's GMs and coaches that know realistically, we're going to be bad this year. We're not trying to lose. We're trying to win. Look at the Cardinals last year. Nobody sits back and goes, boy, the Cardinals, they sucked last year, right? For a team that won 5 games? They were 4 or 5 games. For a team that won 4 or 5 games, I don't think anybody, I haven't talked to anybody or heard anybody saying, like, boy, the Cardinals were awful last year. Why? Because they were in every game. They played over their heads. They went in and beat a couple of teams they shouldn't have beaten late in the season.
They were 4-13.
Did they beat Philly and Pittsburgh? Were those the two games late in the season? They won one game in the state of Pennsylvania. I remember that.
Let's see.
Or maybe I'm misremembering everything.
Yeah, didn't they beat this?
They did win games they shouldn't have.
You got the schedule there, Brockman, or do I need
I
to
was
look it up?
looking. I thought it would be on ESPN when I went to it, and it wasn't.
What is he scrolling through? Is he starting in
wasn't there.
1909?
They beat the Eagles.
There you go. Thank you.
And they beat the Steelers.
2 for 2. I'm glad we
And
got
of course, they beat the Cowboys.
But those are the games, right? Those are the ones that
What do you
stick
mean,
out.
of
They were
course?
there.
Yeah, of course.
Dan Campbell's first season in Detroit.
5 teams beat us last year.
Remember Dan Campbell's first season in Detroit and how they were losing. They started out 0-10-1, something along those. Again, I'm throwing stats out, and I may or may not be 100% accurate. I just came off vacation, so cut me a little bit of slack. But they had like this unbelievable run. He cried.
Yeah, they were 3-13 that year.
3-13. But what did they start? They started like 0-10-1. 0-10-1
on it.
There you go. So, and Dan Campbell cried after like week 3 when Justin Tucker hits that field goal. I'm going to be careful my phrasing on that since last time I tried to talk about that play, I became a meme. But you had those moments, but like I don't think anybody sat back and went, this team's awful. They competed every game. They were in every game.
That's what you want.
So, but, realistically though, like nobody in Arizona was sitting there last year going, yeah, we think we can be a playoff team. If you do, now all of a sudden you got the owner, the team president, whoever it is, going like, what's going wrong? So you have to temper expectations. But everybody's got something to be positive about. Even if it's not, we got a chance to win big this year, it's we've got a plan to win at some point. Some of those plans are going to work out. A lot of them are not.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.